Hi, I'm Agnes, as said. As I will be talking about narrative in games, and I worked as a writer and a narrative designer, I will, from time to time, turn to my trusty notes here. Thanks. So I decided the best way to start was with my LinkedIn profile, where I say that I am a builder of worlds, sometimes with words, sometimes with things, sometimes with people. That is not actually my quote, but all good writers steal. Anyway, in general, this is true, as I have been a theater producer. I am a literary scholar. I'm currently finishing my PhD. I was a writer and a narrative designer for a game called Broken Alliance. And currently I'm helping Tartu University to develop a new curriculum for interactive narratives. Why I do all these things is because I love stories. I love writing them, I like reading them, I like to help other people to see their stories out in the world. Because I think stories are a way for us to make sense of the world, how we bring order to the chaos. And that is sort of why I'm here today, to tell you a bit about narrative in games. So while books and movies let us enjoy a story and watch it unfold, and also sometimes immerse ourselves in it, games are a different type of story because they add another layer. They let us live through the story. We can make choices and affect the story and how it unfolds. So that's why I would say the narrative in games isn't just something extra. It makes players care and remember and come back to the games over and over again. It gives context for the player's actions and meaning for their decisions. So while smooth mechanics and nice visuals are all well and good, we should also have a very clear why behind what and how. If we turn to the earliest computer games, narrative was quite limited. On the image, you can see Pong that came out in 1972 that offered us very simple mechanics without any backstory. But nonetheless, you as players still invent your own narrative. You do have an opponent that you're trying to win. Space Invaders, 1978, has a pretty thin premise, but a very clear premise nonetheless. Aliens and tech, and you have to fight them. And this will spark our imagination even further. 1976, text-based adventures like Colossal Cave Adventure showed us that games can be stories that you can play through instead of just a game to get the highest score. Pac-Man has a very clear story. You're trying to run away from ghosts who's chasing after you. Pac-Man even has a love interest, Mrs. Pac-Man. So what became as dots and pixels soon became quests, stories, and worlds. Today, narrative can come in a variety of ways. One of the clearest is cutscenes, full motion videos, dialogues, voiceovers, scripted events, texts that can include tutorials, item descriptions, or books. But also, you can see story unfolding in environmental design, narrative props, musical themes, special effects, or visual designs of characters and places. So writing for a game demands that the writer works with all different departments because every aspect of the game is affected by the narrative and vice versa. So you as a writer have to make sure that what you write is actually technically possible and that the words, images, and actions all work together towards a common goal, which should be that the player has a good or at least an interesting time while playing your game. So, of course, there is writing the dialogue, which seems to be the basic job for a game writer. But this is not actually true. So there are the barks, the NPC texts, the narratorial voice. But first of all, you as a writer start off by making a lot of documents. I'm going to show you some images from A Broken Alliance. So this is just a small screenshot of different folders from our game project. And you can see narrative is only one of them. And every folder has many, many subfolders that also have subfolders. So, preferably you start off writing a game by making a GDD or a game design document. That is a foundational document that outlines a game's vision, mechanics, story, and technical aspects. And this is something you return back to while you are writing your game. On the screen, you can see an image of GDD from Broken Alliance, a game that has 4 different factions. Here you can see the first idea of one of the factions called Phobos. You can see who the hero is. There are some keywords. The artist has added some inspirational images. So it's basically an outline of what you want your game to be. But before you can do that, you have to come up with a theme. Since this is a game jam, the theme is given to you, but themes are something that your work is concerned with. If you're making a survival game, you're concerned with the theme of, let's say, humanity versus nature, or a lone individual versus living in society. Or you can have a theme based on heritage, food, community, or evils of capitalism, as was Broken Alliance. The theme is something that connects to your story. If we look at What Remains of Edith Finch, we can see that the theme of family and mortality ties together otherwise diverse stories. Without the overarching theme, each story could feel pretty random and disjointed as they take place in different settings. They have sort of a similar visual style, but also they're all very distinct. So while your game doesn't have to make a very strong or political stance on an issue, you have to remember that your game will end up saying something about the world you're living in or something about you. So having a theme in your mind will give your game a clear focus, coherence, and emotional resonance. So that is basically what storytelling is best at when all aspects are aligned around the same thematic goal. So once you have decided on a theme with your teammates, you have to decide on a mood and atmosphere. The mood of your game can be dark or gritty or optimistic or noir influenced or romantic or comical, not violent, as I learned now. So even if you keep your mechanics and the theme the same, but change the tone of your words or your images, it can have a huge impact on how it feels. And the mood and atmosphere is very dependent on visuals. If we take a look at Kentucky Route Zero, this is a game that doesn't rely on action or combat to tell its story. It relies specifically on mood, dialogue, and episodic structure. You play as a driver, you journey along a mysterious highway, and the surreal landscapes and strange characters immerse you in a world that explore themes of death, labor, and memory. here writing is mostly about tone and atmosphere. It gives player enough feel of the world without needing a rigid plot. And the narrative can unfold slowly, provoking emotion that might differ from player to player, even though the images and the words remain the same. Because what you want to avoid, why the music, the images, the words, your mechanics should all come together is because of ludonarrative dissonance. This is something you want to avoid. The term was coined by Clint Hocking while he was writing about Bioshock, but basically it means that there's a difference in between what you're telling your player they're doing or what kind of world they're inhabiting or who they are, and the actions you push them in through your gameplay. So basically it's when you have your player be a guardian angel or prince of lightness or something, and then you make them kill a bunch of puppies. So don't do that. So the mood, the atmosphere, the theme, and the words should all make a cohesive sense. So if you have the theme and the mood, you can move on to world building, which is basically creating the behind-the-scenes textures of your world, the way it is ended up in the state the player has found it. This is a really good place to give your world depth, your characters a backstory, and make the world seem larger than it really is. On a slide here, you can see a champion description from Broken Alliance. You can see there is the original drawing, the latest version of his personality, and the latest version of the artwork. Or you can also add deities to your world. You can add religion, history, economy, economic structures. You name your places. This is a list of random places in the world. You flesh out your map. You give names to everything, so the place would feel lived in. So most of the documents that you write as a game writer don't end up in a game as you write it, but it makes the world and the characters believable and helps the player to connect to them. This is what you build your dialogue and your said words on. So at the same time, you have to take into consideration the mechanics of your game, because mechanics can be the narrative of the game. If we look at Return of the Obra Dinn, the mechanics are tightly intertwined with its narrative. Almost everything the player does is a story beat. You play as an insurance investigator on a ship in 1807, and you're trying to piece together what happened to the crew members from tiny clues. So every observation you make, every decision you write down, every deduction you write down is how the narrative reaches you as the player. So the player is not separate from the story, they are reconstructing the story themselves. So that is a big part of what makes writing for games special and I would say exciting. So you're not just handing someone a finished story, you are creating a framework for discovery. So in Obra Dinn, the unique black and white artwork you can see here also immediately affects how we relate to the story and the narrative. Here, mechanics and art and narrative are all fused together, and if you haven't played it, I recommend. It's a very good game with very good mechanics and narrative and artwork. But sometimes you can have a game where you don't have dialogue or words at all. Let's take a look at unpacking. which is a relaxing puzzle game where the narrative emerges entirely through environmental storytelling. So instead of text or dialogue, players learn about the main character's life by unpacking boxes and arranging belongings in different homes across the years. So unpacking shows us that games don't need words to convey emotional narratives. The gameplay itself becomes the storytelling medium and making players active participants in piecing together someone's life. The same can be said about Outer Wilds, where exploration is the narrative. Every planet, every ruin, every strange anomaly teaches you about the history of a solar system. The world... Too soon. No. I want to go back. Oh, got it. So the world that we inhabit as players gives us clues about the other inhabitants, about the history, about the setting that we have stepped in. So as you already saw, in Fallout, we can see the skeletons at the moment that they died. Or we can read the logs that the inhabitants of the world wrote. So environmental storytelling is basically putting things together in a way to suggest a story. This can also be graffiti or an ad or a warning or something you might miss in the background. So everything you can observe in the world around you enhances the theme, the mood, the atmosphere, and the story that you're trying to tell to the player. So things like architecture, layout, materials, and scale of like buildings or furniture can tell us a lot about the people who use those spaces. This level of storytelling requires a curiosity from the player, but at the same time, it will also increase the immersion and emotional investment of the player, as the game makes them active participants in storytelling, not just passive viewers. But also it can have gameplay uses too. So if you see a saw blade stuck in a sliced up zombie, you know that you can use saw blades to slice up zombies. So maps and signage can help us navigate complex spaces, and props can suggest puzzle hints in a non-intrusive way. But also you have to take into consideration UI and maps and logs and item descriptions and fonts. This all has to harmonize with the story and the words that you write. Here you can see, who knows what it is? Some of you. Excellent. So Red Dead Redemption 2, where the character gets drunk, means that the UI ties in with that feeling of being drunk, slurring your words, or not being able to read correctly. So what does this all tell us about narrative in games and writing for games? So basically, I haven't talked about writing at all, because writing for games is not just about dialogue and cutscenes. Especially in a game jam setting, you have to work very closely with your teammates to figure out how and using what mechanics, what type of art you're going to tell your story. Because story in computer games is about how the player interacts with the world that you place them in. So every choice, every discovery, every failed jump, every exploration becomes part of the narrative experience. Your job, if some of you will choose to take the job as a writer, or the role as a writer in this game jam, is to anticipate, guide, and surprise the player without forcing their hand. So here are some things that you might keep in mind. The narrative gives the player direction. So why are the mechanics there? Why are we clicking this button? Why are we jumping this gap? As a player, I want a reason for doing things. It will also give us meaning. What does this game tell me about whoever made that game, about the world that I'm living in, about me? What type of emotions does it stir up in me? But also, a good narrative will give you surprise, like a single twist, a clever line of dialogue, or a playful tutorial can turn your game into something really memorable. So some final tips, and that was already said, but it's good to go over it again. Keep it simple. So one strong theme is better than a sprawling plot, and not every game needs a dramatic setting or a story. And even though not all ideas are good, but I would suggest that at the beginning of the game jam, all ideas should be voiced out. You can edit and choose later, but be prepared to make changes in your initial ideas. Let the mechanics and narrative work together to tell a story. So if you're making a game about cooperation, like Overcooked, make the mechanics force players to cooperate. Remember humor and play. If you come up with an idea and it makes all of you laugh at 4 in the morning, then I would just go with it. And don't aim for perfect. I would just aim for something that is cool or nice to look back on. That's it. Thanks.